Video games are experiences. They're not just content mines. They're not just stories. They're lived experiences. They unfold through choices, hesitation, instinct, and timing. Every corner turned, every sound heard, every failure and retry becomes part of you. Games don't just entertain. They immerse you, make you responsible, and reward your patience or punish your recklessness. That's what makes them unforgettable. That brings us to the real issue. Why do so many game-to-film adaptations feel so hollow? Why is it that stories we loved living through become bland when we just watch them? Today, we're digging into that. How studios keep missing the point when adapting games, and how they could actually get it right. Because it's not just about lifting characters or plot lines. It's about translating an experience. One of the core issues is the way these adaptations are written. In most cases, it feels like a rushed job. Dialogue that sounds stilted, exposition crammed into the first 10 minutes, and an obsession with cool moments over meaningful ones. Characters speak in lines meant to be clipped into trailers, not lived-in conversations. The Mortal Kombat reboot from 2021 is a perfect example. A film that cared more about catchphrases and callbacks than coherent storytelling. It threw in fatalities and signature moves. But without compelling characters or coherent plot momentum, the movie felt like a stitched-together series of fight scenes. Visually loud, emotionally hollow. Part of this stems from a belief that fan service can replace story. That throwing in Easter eggs and recognizable weapons or characters will be enough. But when a narrative structure is weak and the stakes are unclear, none of those matters. The recent Halo series also fell into this trap. It was heavy on visual fidelity, but light on emotional weight. The audience doesn't just want to see the Master Chief. They want to feel what he's fighting for. And too often, adaptations forget that. Another common mistake is a complete misunderstanding of tone and genre. A gritty, morally gray game can't just be sanitized for a PG-13 rating and expect to retain its impact. Assassin's Creed, a franchise built on philosophy, historical fiction, and stealth, was turned into a bland, generic action movie with no soul. Its layered mythology was flattened into a series of incoherent chase scenes. Similarly, The Witcher started strong on Netflix, especially with its first season's rich world-building and Geralt's philosophical detachment. Henry Cavill brought gravitas to Geralt because he was a gamer. He understood the role beyond just dialogue. But as later seasons strayed from the tone and complexity of Sapkowski's lore, and it lost its tonal clarity, alienating both gamers and newcomers. Compare that to Arcane, Netflix's stunning adaptation of League of Legends. It didn't pander to fans. It honored them by telling an emotionally mature story that worked even if you'd never touched the game. It took the world seriously. The characters felt lived in. The animation was jaw-dropping. And it had one key advantage. It understood tone. The biggest hurdle in adapting a game is also the most obvious. Games are interactive, films are not. When you're playing something like The Last of Us, you're not just watching Joel and Ellie struggle through a post-apocalyptic wasteland. You are Joel. Every gunshot, every choice, every tense moment where you sneak past clickers with barely a bullet to spare, it belongs to you. It's personal. It's tactile. So, when that same story is told in a TV format, there's a layer of detachment that sets in. Suddenly, you're no longer in control. You're no longer inside the world. You're watching it from the outside. And unless the writing, pacing, and performances are perfect, that switch from active to passive can suck the emotional air right out of the room. That's why The Last of Us Season 1 mostly worked, because it leaned into cinematic strengths. Slow pacing, character nuance, silence, and restraint. But with Season 2, as reactions are already showing, the shift toward rushed storytelling, questionable casting continuity, and deviation from what made the original dynamic special is starting to show cracks. Critics might defend it, but real fans, the ones who lived this story, feel the distance. Another failure of many adaptations is the absence of real gamers in the writing room. This isn't to say every screenwriter must be a competitive player, but there's a noticeable disconnect when people who don't engage with the medium try to translate it. Take Red Dead Redemption 2. It's not just a Western. It's about slow deterioration, moral weight, and the quiet rituals that shape a man's soul. Arthur Morgan's story works because you live it through choices, routines, and silences that carry emotional weight. Strip that away, and you're left with a hollow cowboy tale. A proper adaptation wouldn't just retell the plot. It would reinterpret the game's atmosphere, its introspection, its rhythm. That insight only comes from creators who've actually been there. And that's why Super Mario Bros. Worked. It was silly, bright, self-aware, but crucially, it wasn't ashamed of its source. It knew Mario was never about plot. It was about charm and playfulness. The film translated those feelings, not just the aesthetics. But if you look at the recently released Minecraft movie, it didn't feel like it was made by people who actually understood why the game matters. It was loud, fast, and full of celebrity voices, but empty. Minecraft is about quiet creativity, discovery, and freedom. The film threw all of that out to chase a formula. It felt like a studio cashing in on a big IP, not try to translate what made the game meaningful. It didn't bomb, but it said everything about how studios often care more about selling familiarity than understanding it. Then there's pacing. Games have a unique tempo, slow build-ups, optional detours, bursts of action, reflective quiet. Movies, by contrast, often condense everything into a 2-hour sprint. The pressure to keep things moving leads to shallow arcs. You lose the sense of world, of place, of consequence. This is one reason why shows like Arcane work better. It allowed itself to slow down, to breathe, to explore character psychology. It wasn't afraid of nuance. Compare that with something like Uncharted. The game series thrives on chemistry, banter, emotional undertones hidden in adventure. But the movie felt like a checklist, plain set piece, treasure map, double cross. Despite Tom Holland's charm, it lacked the lived-in quality of the games. The pacing never settled, the stakes felt artificial, and nothing lingered. On the flip side, there have been surprising successes. Sonic the Hedgehog, despite its absurdity, worked because it embraced tone and understood its audience. It was never pretending to be profound. It focused on fun, on momentum, on the character's heart. It treated Sonic like a character, not a gimmick. The pacing was breezy, the tone playful. It embraced its absurdity with sincerity. The history of game adaptations is littered with misfires. The 1993 Super Mario Bros. Movie was a fever dream of dystopian weirdness that no one asked for. Street Fighter was unintentionally comedic. Doom tried to bank on The Rock and a first-person gimmick, but failed to tell a meaningful story. But this history also has turning points. The 2001 Tomb Raider film starring Angelina Jolie offers a more telling example. It was slick, pulpy, and embraced the video game energy without trying to replicate the gameplay. It wasn't a perfect film, but it understood its own tone. Light, adventurous, self-aware. For its time, it worked because it didn't pretend to be deeper than it was. More recently, Cyberpunk stunned fans by actually enhancing the game's world, not just replicating it. And Fallout Prime Video was a rare triumph, because it wasn't trying to retell Fallout 3. It captured the dark humor, the bleak beauty, and the absurd violence of that universe. These shows succeeded by respecting the essence of the source material without being enslaved to it. As we move into a future of bigger budgets and more game IP adaptations, the question remains, who's really telling these stories? Is it filmmakers who understand cinematic language and game culture? Or is it boardrooms looking to be the next Marvel? Games are not buckets of lore waiting to be scooped up and plastered onto a script. They are emotional experiences. They are atmosphere, choice, trial and error, immersion. Adapting them means surrendering the player's agency, yes, but it also means embracing the tools of cinema completely. Mood, performance, score, shot composition. A good adaptation doesn't just retell the story of the game. It reimagines it in a language that belongs to film. When that effort is sincere, when writers understand the soul of a game rather than just its plot, the result can be transcendent. You get moments that feel earned, characters that live and breathe, stories that matter. But when the effort is cynical, When it's driven by IP rather than intent, what you get is exactly what you expect: flat scenes, hollow arcs, and disappointment masquerading as adaptation. And in that disappointment, the gap between player and viewer only grows wider.